Hello, everyone. I think we are starting the webinar. We are online now. So it's a pleasure to be with all of you today. I'm Céline Jacquin. I'm the Senior Manager for Latin America at the Hub at HOT for Latin America and the Caribbean. So tomorrow we will celebrate the World Environment Day. That's why I wanted to organize an exceptional lineup today to explore how local and regional stakeholders are using effectively cartographic data, and in some cases participatory cartographic data, to enhance climate action. So I will introduce now our exciting panel. We have 3 speakers today. Carlos Duarte is our local partner for, he will share practical cases in Guatemala. Additionally, we have 2 colleagues, Daniel Pinillos and Yves Lesenfants from the Inter-American Institute for Global Change Research and the Inter-American Development Bank. The 3 of them will discuss key insights on how open data and participatory data initiatives are being utilized to address climate action. So we will also explore how these initiatives can leverage data collection to include a diverse range of actors, of local organizations, of governments, with a focus on strategies for fostering community engagement and participation. That's the main work line we want to promote. So we also had normally Tatiana Para as a speaker, but unfortunately she couldn't participate today. She had a personal emergency. However, we will share with you in the chat now, so please check the link we will share, of a blog we just published with her about her work with Meninas da Geo, her collective of cartographers women. It's a women-led mapping group, and how they are enabling indigenous quilombola communities in the Amazon, in the Brazilian Amazon, through open mapping. So you can read in that blog how participatory mapping is strengthening their land rights and helping the communities to promote sustainable practices and preserving cultural heritage amidst industrial pressure and mining pressure in Brazil. So before we start, some notes. During the session, we will start hearing a series of comments from the 3 speakers. And at the end, we will have a Q&A session. So please keep your question, or you can start writing your question in the chat, and we will list them, and we will share them with the speakers in the end. And we will like to ask questions. So yeah, you can share in the chat, and you will also find a recorded version of this video in the YouTube channel for future viewing. So we can also see the link of the YouTube channel in the chat. So let's start introducing our speakers today. The first one is Carlos Duarte from the company Geotechnological of Central America. He's Guatemalan and systems engineer. He holds a master in remote sensing applied to natural resources and PhD candidate in sustainable development. He's a researcher at the Institute of Environment and Technologies at the Rafael Landivar University in Guatemala. He has an extensive experience in the use of open data, free software, and the transfer and the appropriation of technology by the rural communities and indigenous people in particular in Guatemala and other countries of Central America. He is also a strong promoter of volunteer mapping communities. The second speaker is Daniel Pinillos from the IDB for Global Change Research. He holds a PhD in landscape ecology and resource conservation from Wageningen University and Montpellier Sub-Agro, and also a master degree from the University of Freiburg and the University of Eastern Finland. He has over 10 years of research experience in Guatemala, Brazil, Finland, and Germany, the Netherlands and France, mainly on the intersection of landscape ecology and land change science. His experience includes the application and integration of models and cartographic and statistical methods. Finally, the third speaker is Yves Lesenfants from the IDB Bank. He's a Belgian ecologist with over 30 years of field experience in Latin America, particularly in the Andean and Amazonian regions. He's specialized in technological innovation for conservation, development, and land management. He currently leads activities related to innovation, bioeconomy, and geospatial intelligence for the Inter-American Development Bank's Amazonia Forever program. So let's say hello to our speakers, and I will give the floor to our director, Fabrizio Scrollini, for a short message.
Thank you very much, Celine. It's a pleasure to be here today. Muy buenos días, buenas tardes, good morning, good afternoon to everyone, or bon dia, boa tarde, depending on which time of the Americas and language in the Americas are you. My name is Fabrizio Scrollini. I'm the director of the Open Mapping Hub in Latin America and the Caribbean. I'm very excited to welcome you to this special webinar in which we are commemorating the World Environment Day. And here you have a lineup of very good, wonderful speakers that will discuss the crucial role that open participatory data for climate action and what do we have to say about it. This is a day that reminds us of our responsibility to protect our planet, and it's also a day in which we share our progress and recognize the work ahead, particularly considering that so many communities are already experiencing tangible impacts from one of our biggest environmental challenges, which is obviously climate change. And at HOT, we are doing our best to keep up with this challenge. We are at the forefront of open mapping, and we are trying to use open mapping to gather crucial data that informs climate action, and particularly plans and strategies from local communities. Also to identify the infrastructure risks that are arising from sea level rise and other climate impacts, and also for monitoring forest conservation and supporting essentially those people starting to be recognized as actual climate refugees. We know that open data enhances transparency, accountability, and accessibility, and we know that it informs action. But we also know that participation, that actual use of the data, is what actually foster ownership and responsibility towards effective climate action. And we are here to collaborate with diverse stakeholders, some of those academia, governments, multilateral organizations, the private sector. All of them are essential to address this challenge. And so we are happy to essentially collaborate today and highlight regional initiatives that goes from Guatemala to the Amazon, and the voices of community members and experts that are actually, striving towards, significant and positive change in this field. And we're here to share best practices and also to make them visible and encourage valuable discussions in the way forward. And so I look forward to listening to you. I look forward to collaborating with you, and just to, let's say, mark this webinar as the start of a conversation and as the start of a collaboration, not only among us, but also with a wider mapping community across the Americas. So thank you very much again. Muchísimas gracias. And I look forward to listening to you and learning from you during this webinar.
Thank you very much, Fabrizio. So we will start the dynamic right now. It will be about discussing with the three speakers around two guiding questions. So we will start in alphabetical order with Carlos, then Daniel, then Yves. Around the first question, which is, can you share with us and with the public an example, a key example of your work on how open data or participatory data initiatives are being utilized to address climate question, climate action in general? The floor is yours, Carlos.
Thank you very much, Celine. Hello, everyone. Can you confirm that you hear me just fine?
Thank you. Very well.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for attending this webinar today. My name is Carlos Duarte. I am from Guatemala, and today I'm going to speak and share my experiences with you regarding a very dear piece of work for me, the Open Cities project we did in Guatemala in the latest 2 years in partnership with HOT. I'm going to try to share my screen. Thank you. Okay, the project Open Cities in Guatemala was named Community Mapping for Sustainable Forest Management in San Jose Poaquil, in the Department of Chimaltenango in Guatemala. I'm going to give you a few information on this place. San Jose Poaquil, well, is a small town located in the mountains of western Guatemala. It is inhabited by indigenous people from the Maya Cachiquel ethnic group. And for these people, they consider their forest as a living and sacred organism that feed their lives and satisfy their primary living needs. The Open Cities project focused on developing a concept called community forest management model supported by geospatial data. Basically, it is working with the authorities and the local indigenous people of this place to strengthen their capacities on sustainable forest management at the community level through the use and generation and use of geospatial data. Basically what we wanted to achieve with implementing this model is to mitigate the threats of deforestation and forest degradation. We wanted to maximize the benefits of conservation and sustainable forest management, mainly the economics, such as the livelihoods associated with the forest, the environmental benefits such as the climate resilience, water supply, regulation of the hydrological cycle, biodiversity conservation, and also the social benefits such as the supply of forest products and byproducts such as firewood, medicinal plants, protection of sacred and culturally important sites, and so on. We wanted to enhance this community ability to access the forest incentive programs for indigenous communities that are available here in Guatemala. And finally, we wanted to support a model for community forest management that enhanced with the use of geospatial data that can potentially be replicated or adapted in other regions of our country. That was the objectives of our project at the very beginning. Basically, our approach was to create a small local community of volunteer mappers that we train and transfer technologies on geospatial data generation and use to enhance their forest management skills. Basically, we work with this group of volunteer mappers, mapping the forest, doing the mapping of their forest, the resources and pressures associated with this forest. They hold a very large portion of forest that is community owned by this community. And for this, we developed mobile applications to support the participatory mapping of the community. We also work with them monitoring the threats to the forest, like deforestation, like forest degradation, like illegal extraction. And we also work with them, supporting them to formulate and monitoring a forest management plan, which is a very important instrument for them to have access to the local programs on forest incentives, both from the government as well as from World Bank project that is working in Guatemala. And finally, we created a community GIS unit that basically administer this bunch of data. Key factors in our Open Cities experience is the strong local involvement. Nothing of what we achieved in this project will be possible without a strong local involvement. What I mean with this is that we didn't get to San Jose Poaquil to make maps. We got there to teach them and train them to make their own maps, to get them to know their own territory, and transfer them the skills and the tools to map their own territory and to keep these maps up to date. We made use of intensive training effort. We did about 30 training activities during this project, and we also had a continuous technical assistance and support with this group, so they get familiar and comfortable with the use of the technology, and start creating their own data and using their own data for their own purposes. We use only open source tools, software tools, and custom made for them, trying to respect their culture and their traditional knowledge. And finally, continuous follow-up. We work with them in partnership with a bunch of local organizations that guarantee us that this effort will have sustainability in the long term. One of the things that we are proud of is the Open Cities data platform, where they use custom-made mobile apps in the field to map their forest, map their pressures, map their conservation values. Everything goes to set up in the cloud that is automatically managed, and everything ends up in a web platform completely automatically without any high-end administration skill needed. And they use this platform for generating maps, for monitoring their resources, for planning their management of their forest, and to monitor its quality and health. This is basically what we did in this community. We are so proud of our results, because the community now has demonstrated that their skill for community level forest management has been strongly enhanced through this project. Before of this, they used to hire private companies to do whatever kind of mapping in their forest. Now they acquired their own abilities to do that, and we are very proud for them, because basically this project is demonstrating that indigenous communities, even when they are not very familiar with technology, with the appropriate training approach, they can get very remarkable results. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carlos. We will continue with the same question with Daniel. Daniel, if you can give some key examples.
Thank you. Can you hear me well?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, thank you it's a real pleasure to be here with you all today to discuss these interesting topics. So I will briefly discuss some of the research questions that we as a research team or different research team have addressed, both in Guatemala and in Brazil. I will describe some of the results that we've generated, and I will end up with some remarks that are hopefully useful for today's discussion and can contribute. Next slide, please. So with colleagues from Universidad Rafael Landívar in Guatemala, we addressed this question of what is the relationship between economic activities, the economy, the economic system in general, and with the environment, with ecological functionality, and specifically what it's in its dependency on ecological functionality and concomitant ecosystem services, but also what is the impact that the economic system is having on the environment and on biodiversity and on public health. We did this from the perspective, the conceptual framework of ecosystem accounting, which is a statistical system precisely developed by the UN precisely to quantify, to assess, to measure economy's dependency on ecological functionality. Next slide, please. So we started by taking a look at Guatemala in terms of biophysical terms. So this is a map of basins of Guatemala and altitude. So in order to describe economic activities in terms of biophysical characteristics, taking the basin, the watershed as a fundamental spatial unit. Next, please. So we basically started by integrating different data. So on your left side, you have nighttime lights imagery that we took as a proxy of urbanization and industrial economic activities. And on the right side, you had land uses and agricultural economic activities. We integrated all this data, next slide please, to generate this map, which shows GDP per basin, which is not an unusual way to describe or see a GDP, but we thought it was a starting point to really start trying to interpret the economy in terms of biophysical conditions. We also estimated ecosystem services. Next, please. On your left side, we also estimated water yield and sediment retention, and on your right side, the exported sediment as ecosystem disservice. Next, please. And we put all this data together, both ecological and economic data, and we run a cluster analysis, which is a statistical technique that allows you to group, in this case, basins. So what you see on your left side is this list is the names of all the 62 basins that conform Guatemala, group or clustered by how close or by how similar the pattern was in terms of correlation between economic and ecological variables. Next, please. And when we put that into a map, it looks like this. So what you see here in different colors is the cluster of basins grouped by the different ecological and economic variables that we took into consideration. Next slide, please. And so we can describe all these clusters in terms of land uses, economic activities, ecosystem services, and ecosystem disservices. And we argue that this methodology that we developed here of integrating different data serves as a first diagnose to establish relevant spatial units that describe the economy in terms of biophysical conditions, to then zoom in to finer scale and to finer measurements to actually quantify this dependency of the economy on nature. Next slide, please. Then in Brazil, we address, as part of my PhD dissertation, similar questions regarding the spatial aspect of how to reconcile forest conservation, in this case, with rural development in the Eastern Amazon region, but also trying to understand the perceptions of stakeholders regarding these topics, such as policies and that had to do with land use planning. So I'll describe briefly this. Next slide, please. So we work in the northern part of Brazil, in the state of Pará, a municipality of Paragominas, which is roughly 20,000 square kilometers. Next, please. And what we did here was similar in the sense of integrating different data on your left side. regarding ecosystem services, even policy objectives that we consider could account for societal demands, to generate a map in terms of ecosystem services and potential trade-offs between agricultural activities and biodiversity and carbon sequestration, for example. On your right side, we also sat down with landholders to discuss these topics, such as forest conservation in private lands, which you can imagine could be or can be very controversial. And next slide. So basically what I try to describe briefly is how with these studies we navigated through different spatial scales, the global scale, also different governance spaces, where you see different goals such as management, risk management, vulnerability reduction, participation, economic growth, and for instance. And so one of the key questions, I think, what is always how those transdisciplinary science can really approach all these different scales, different goals, and how open mapping as well as a socio-technical process, I would argue, can really contribute to also put all these elements into a single space and a single interpretation as a socio-technical process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel. And we will continue with Yves. Yves, as the floor is yours.
Thank you, Celine. Can you see my presentation? Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. So thank you so much. This is very interesting. I'm very happy to be here. And perhaps what I'm going to talk about today is a second level of how we want to really use open data and how we want to reach the last mile in terms of the use of this data and the decision making in the Amazon region. So basically, I'm from the IDB. I'm representing the Amazonia Forever program. That is an umbrella program working in 8 countries in the Amazon region. And basically, this is really big. And something that is very important is when we are asking to, let's say, an employee, a municipality employee in Bolivia, or somebody working on a project in Guyana, how all this huge amount of data, each day there is terabytes of new data related with the Amazon region. Usually it's a very hard work for them to identify where is the data, to have the capacity to analyze the data and to understand the data. So what I'm going to do today is to present you it's almost a very new thing. It's a prototype that we are working on. Basically, and this is even a temporary name that we are calling Amazonia 360, because we really want to help any stakeholder and people involved in the development and conservation of the Amazon region to have an easier access to geospatial information. So this is making much easy the understanding of the region. So what I'm going to show you, we are building a public good that will be, let's say, a free service for all the people working in the Amazon region. And I'm going to show you how this is functioning. And this is mostly based on open data and also opening doors to partnerships with different kind of institutions that can help us to bring this data to the people who have no capacity, no understanding, no tools, no license to use traditional GIS tools in the field. So now we have this area. So you can see the map of the Amazon region in terms of the work area of the IDB Amazonia Forever program in the region. So we are covering 8 countries. This is 8 million square kilometers. This is huge. So we are using these basically these base maps to help any kind of user to understand better the region. So let's say I'm a person working in Guyana about an idea of paving a road crossing Guyana, and somebody in my team, in my organization, is asking me how could be the impact of paving this road within the Amazonian territory, and how much communities are crossing this road, and the contextual information. So I'm going to, obviously we have the OpenStreetMap data layer, but we have, and I'm going to do an exercise online with you. Let's go to Guyana and let's select the map related with the road. And I'm going to give you an example on how easy is the way we want to use and to make accessible the geospatial information coming from different sources and mostly from open source. So I'm going to use the tool. As you have seen, I have 3 types of tools. This is very traditional. So I can select, let's say, this road very quickly. I'm doing it very approximately because of the time, but we can do really a very fine path, but also upload a data, and the system will calculate automatically a buffer zone of 50 kilometers around this road. So we can do the same thing in any place in 8 million square kilometers. So at the IDB, we've been working a lot on consolidating a huge database with different kind of partners, and this is what we are trying to do in terms of experience. So we already see that the buffer area is 30 square kilometer, almost the size of Belgium. If I select this, I have an access to a selector of different kind of key indicators that we are starting to work. Again, this is a prototype. We are only working with 18 indicators now, but we are going to put more than 115 indicators in the database in the future. But let's say I'm going to select the topics. We have natural physical environment, socio-demographic indicator, land use and conservation indicators, bioeconomy. For the Amazon, it's very important. So we want to know also who is doing what about our bioeconomy. And finally, as a testing ground, we want also to see where is the IDB investing and which could be the impact of this investment in this region. So I'm going to ask the system to create a report. So basically, the system is drilling down the database based on the territory we've been specifying here. And we already have some kind of very interesting information. So again, I'm a municipality employee or a Ministry of Transportation employee with nobody in my team working on GIS or having some kind of tech experience to do that. So I'm working on the conversation. So I can see we have 4 protected areas along this road, 31 indigenous communities. We have the list of the municipalities and the administrative boundaries. We have a description of the natural physical environment. We have even a profile of the region in terms of elevation, and we can also select different kind of data that we can see on this thing. So this is important also, that we've been taking a lot of care on documenting and giving the credits and even a direct access to the data source for each map and each indicators that we are using. We are also including some kind of nice widget to explain, for example, oh, in this area, we have 72% of tree cover and 23 of grassland. So again, we do the same thing with socio-demographic indicator. We can even see at at full screen, basically the deprivation index along the road. And we have, again, all the data and the credits and the way that this deprivation index has been calculated. And the same thing with the land use. We can even see, for example, in this case, we have the road is crossing 3 very important protected area. The database is interactive, so we can see directly what we have. But most of the question is always, how much indigenous territories are we affecting in this area? And this is something that we have, and we have, again, the database linked to this, and also obviously all the reference. The bioeconomy research, so we hired a consultancy to identify all the people and institutions working on bioeconomy in the Amazon region. So this is very easy to understand also, that we have 14 institutions working in this in the buffer zone of the road in Guyana. So we already know who is doing what in terms of this type of activity on bioeconomy. Again, this is a very early stage prototype, so this will be interactive and connected with other type of database. Finally, we also understand better the type of investment the IDB is doing in the region as a multilateral institution. So we can see we have 22 operation totaling $33 million, potentially impacting, affecting, or benefiting the buffer area. We have, and we can even see the distribution of the sector. So we have 7% of this amount that is dedicated to science and technology, or in 5% in regional integration, and we have the list of the project. And we are working on public data, open source data, and also data that is provided by specific partners. Finally, something that is very important also for this buffer area in this region in Guyana, we can also drill down in the database of the knowledge product, because usually the people is asking, oh, which kind of research has been done in this area about bioeconomy? And it's very complicated to find it. So if I'm a municipality employee, I can find it very easily without any GIS license, super processor capacities, and knowledge of the tools. So basically here we have, again, resources that are coming from the IDB, but also in the future we are going to open this also to, let's say, report produced by the World Bank, for example. So this is, I'm finishing here. This is basically how we are working at the IDB on the GIS experience for people with no experience in GIS. And this is 95% of the market in the stakeholder area in the region, that basically, even if we have terabytes of new data each day, people has no way to really leverage the capacity and the intelligence of the data to make a good decision in the region. So I'm closing here and very happy to share idea and to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yves. So thank you very much to our three speakers for their first experiences. I would like to share very briefly some first takeaways from their participation before going to the second question. The first one is the importance of the local involvement, which is key to really address real issues, real data needs from the communities, as well as the co-design of the methodologies to really give the importance of these issues in the data model and methodology. Also, the follow-up with local and rural communities on to really install capacities. Another takeaway is the importance of the transdisciplinary science to help and to have an approach on different scales. And it will be interesting to understand there how it can help the governance aspect in climate actions. And the third one is a question of the access to pertinent information. So we have to understand a very contradictory situation, but still extremely common, that we have every day a more important abundance of data with at the same time we have a lot of innovation with artificial intelligence. We have more and more data, but still no access to this data for people who are the one who needs data the most. So we invite everybody in the chat, everybody who are looking the webinar, to think around these questions, these initiatives in other contexts in the world. We are focused now in Amazon and tropical forests in America, but we hope that it's meaningful for other contexts. So I'll continue with the second question for the three of you. How do you consider that these initiatives leverage or integrate data collection to incorporate a diverse and wide range of factors, especially through strategies that foster communities' engagement and participation? It can be participation into planning process around projects, and also with the final objective of creating more climate resilient cities and neighborhood and communities in general. We will start again with Carlos. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Celine. Okay, yeah. Basically, in our experience in San Jose Paquil, is that before the project, there was absolutely no information, no cartographic or statistical or any other kind of information on the landscape, on the territory we were going to work. We find out that even the OpenStreetMap was almost blank for this area. So we found a huge gap of data availability in this region for any purpose, for whatever purpose, not only for natural resources management or for climatic resilience. It was for whatever planning, basic planning need. There were absolutely no data. So we try to mold a model in which we were trying to incorporate the community, the local communities into producing their own data for their own territory, for their own purposes. We get there trying to enhance their abilities, their skills for local sustainable forest management. But finally, we ended up enhancing their skills to produce and use geospatial data for any other purpose, and we are very proud of it. Basically, the OpenStreetMap project, the Open City project in San Jose Paquil has been instrumental in strengthening the community forest management through the use of geospatial data, through the active community participation in conserving their own natural resources. We created local capacities to generate key data, and that has improved the effectiveness of their forest management skills using participatory and remote mapping activities that provided detailed information on the communal forest area, its different strata, the natural and cultural values within this forest area, and the threats such as deforestation and illegal extraction, forest fires, diseases, and so on. So now there is a very complete database on local information for this piece of forest that is being used to formulate a formal forest management plan that is the key for this community to access the money of the national forest incentive programs. And once they have access to the money, they will have much more resources to take care of their own forest. So we are very proud of having developed this model in which mobile applications in their own language, using only open tools to generate new information that is being clearly used for a positive purpose and being apported to the OpenStreetMap, which is our repository for this kind of data. It has been possible through this model. We expect that this model can be replicated in more places in Guatemala in the near future, and we are happy that the World Bank and other donors have shown interest on this model to try to replicate it as a successful history in how local communities, indigenous communities can appropriate of technology to enhance their ancestral skills to protect their forests. Thank you, Celine.
Thank you. What are your thoughts, Daniel, about this question?
Can you remind me of the question again, please, Celine? Just to...
Sure. So around the integration and collection of data, how do you seek to integrate a diverse range of factors? So it was very clear in your presentation, because you are focused on looking for this transdisciplinary approach. But within that, how do you try, or how do you see the possibility to foster community engagement and participation in general?
Right. I think a critical moment when a critical moment is the moment in which the issue is identified, or the research question, let's say, but it can be an actual problem, an actual issue for a community. So it is from that very from the inception of identifying what is going on and what needs to be known about a particular issue that the formulation of a research question, of a question, needs to be really to incorporate different actors, non-academic stakeholders, which are fundamental, having an holistic perspective on the issue, for example, from a socio-ecological point of view, for example, in which institutions, where the institutional aspect is considered, the environment is considered, the economy is considered, the societal, cultural aspects as well. So I think this is the contribution that for example, academia can provide, is sort of like conceptual frameworks that can serve as tools to understand complexity in reality, but also very importantly, that allow a dialogue between different knowledge systems. Science is just one knowledge system that can dialogue with different knowledge systems. I think Carlos' example and case study illustrates that very well as an example of this dialogue between knowledge systems. And through that dialogue, generate and articulate the actual questions that are going to be addressed. And from that point, identifying the tools that can be useful to address the issue, not only address the issue, but also imagine and give room for creativity to how to solve the particular issue that is at stake. So I think that's the mission of transdisciplinary science, in essence.
So the community itself is part of the actors, participants of this transdisciplinary approach, right?
Crucial, yeah, absolutely.
Yves, do you have
yes, thank you, Céline. I would say on my side that we are seeing two types of communities, and depending the scale of the work also. So we have, and we are expecting with the work we are doing with Amazonia 360, a community of institutions that will collaborate in an open way with the data, because this kind of approach can be very engaging with institutions to say, oh, this is a platform that the IDB is offering to support us to make more available or accessible the data that we are producing. So kind of publishing platform in terms. So we are already working with different kind of institutional partners to work on a data partnership at this level. So this is already a community that we are trying to build. But also something that is very important, the Amazonia Forever program, as an holistic program for the Amazon region, has an impact framework, a very important impact framework, and aligned with a new strategy that the IDB want to focus on the impact of the project. That means we have now a huge opportunity also to develop the tools that Daniel and also Carlos have been talking about, to work on a different level of community that it's much more the local stakeholder community. So people reporting on the impact of the investment of multilateral organization at the field level. And this is something that is not new, but we can basically systematize it in a much better way with the new tools that we are working today. And also combining with the data that we are collecting with the first community. So we are trying to aggregate the intelligence between an institutional community and a local stakeholder, individual participant at the field level to understand better the impact of the investment from the government, from the multilateral, and even from the private sector.
Excellent. I really thank your participation. To not take much more of the time, we can share some questions, and we will be finishing on the top of the hour this webinar. So one first question is from Luis for Carlos. Carlos, how does open mapping strengthen indigenous communities to preserve their territory, and what we can learn from their approach to mapping the world?
Thank you, Liz, for this key question. Yes, basically what we've learned from this experience in Guatemala is that in a lot of occasions, indigenous people lack of information enough or appropriate detail and quality information on their territory to plan or to implement whatever kind of project. And we found that participatory mapping and remote mapping are key tools for them to build their own data. And this data will transform the way they manage their resources, they plan their future, and they take care of their very beloved cultural heritage and natural heritage. So we found that in the case of San Jose Poaquil, before they had basically nothing in terms of information about their territory, and now they have an extensive, very detailed geographic database on their territory that they are very proud of, and that they are using not only to preserve their forests in a better way than before, because now they are combining their traditional and ancestral knowledge with these modern techniques for mapping, and they are coming up with new tools like their community management forest plan and other instruments that are being critical for them to access funding for their own projects. So we are in presence of an experience that started from the scratch and ended up with the community empowered to produce their own data for their own territories, and they are using this data for to better management their heritage.
Many thanks, Carlos. Another question is for Daniel. How do you integrate the perceptions of land users or owners into your geospatial analysis?
Yeah, thank you, Luis, for this question. It's a very interesting one. I must say that I didn't. This was one of the limitations of my study, or of my thesis in this case, precisely this one, because the methodologies we use for example, to quantify perception, which is what we did basically, it's not spatially explicit. So that was a limitation of this study. But what we argue in this paper about this methodology, what it does is to quantify perception in order to create a typology of perceptions, is that many of the perceptions regarding forests, whether it was positive or negative towards forest conservation, was, I would argue, we argue that it was pretty much determined by the geographical or the spatial location of each one of the land holdings. So, for example, a property that was located at an area that had unfavorable soils for soybean production and had a little bit of forest with good soil for soya production tended to have a negative perception toward forest, because obviously economically, at least in the short term, it would make sense for them to use that land covered by forest, whereas other landholders that had plenty of area where they could grow soybean and they could spare having forest. So we didn't go into the detail to analyze this spatially, and I would say it would have been a very interesting next step to do, but the thesis had to come to an end. But it is indeed an interesting observation, and I think the perception was a lot driven by the spatial location of each one of the land holdings. So I think that could be a first approximation to answer that question.
Thank you. Yves, another question for you. Are these various groups or community missing critical community level data that would enhance their analysis or outcomes, etc., in the platform you manage?
Thank you, Celine. So far we are working, let's say, in terms of scale, top down. It's meaning that when we have 8 million square kilometers, we are trying to work at the country level and going down. Obviously, at one moment, we are going to identify necessities and opportunities also on let's say, community mapping and open data. To be frank, as we are just starting with the project and prototyping, all we've not identified so far at this granular level, but for sure we will identify opportunities in the future. But so far we don't have been identifying specific needs at this level.
There is another question we have, and I add a little myself on this question. It is for everyone, the three of you, from university education, what aspects do you consider that should be addressed to raise awareness about the care of forests and nature? And I add systemic care of forest and nature, which is maybe a little more innovative, in general in Latin America or in the rest of the world. Yes, please.
Thank you, Celine. I think for Latin Americans and for basically every other region in the world, to raise the awareness among young people going to universities regarding the central role on forest on the life itself, it is critical. It is critical that everybody is aware that the water we drink, the air we breathe, the wood we use, and the biodiversity our own lives relies on is held by the forests. And I think that it is needed also that the awareness that taking care of these forests, no matter where they are, is a global responsibility. No, it's not only the responsibility of the people living out there where the forests are. I mean, they are holding up and a very heavy responsibility, global responsibility for taking care of the forests that every inhabitant of this world needs. So I think the awareness should be raised, and that it is a responsibility of everybody in this planet. And regarding this, I want to say that recent investigation says that at least 60% of the world remaining forests are being taken care by indigenous peoples. So we have to make a call on this idea as well. Thank you.
I don't know if Yves or Daniel would like to answer that too.
I can just comment that it's again, I think the the most important thing is the territorial knowledge at different level, the territorial perception, and also sending the message that it's not today only reserved to scientists and to people who can manage very specific tool. We have the tools that can enable communities to do a very great job and to so in both ways to broad data to some platform, but also to collect data from this platform and to have much better territorial intelligence share with the local communities.
Many thanks to all of you, and many thanks to the public too for their meaningful questions. We will have to close this webinar, but the conversation is not closing here. We invite you to continue posting questions for the speakers, and we will communicate this question to them on the YouTube channel. So you can comment there, and we will continue the dialogue there. I would like to give a general final comment. The three speakers have induced us into the thinking of in a systemic manner of describing the territory, right, through the geospatial data, understanding its issues and what is it to be addressed and how we should address the different issues to achieve impact by integrating holistically different intelligences, meaning the vision of different communities, and also understanding the communities in a very large manner. So we generally think around communities as very local stakeholders or inhabitants, residents, but they are also the universities, the organizations, the governments. So we have a constellation of different communities with different intelligences, and we also think that an approach taking into account these different visions are extremely important to deal with the climate change effects in an integral manner. We have seen also the importance of access of the information, and access is a very big issue with sub-issues we have to deal with. It's not only sharing resources, it's dealing and thinking around the licenses and the integration of different sources, which is also a technical challenge, and the long-term management of the capacity building and with the accompaniment needs by the communities. Different communities also, again, universities don't have necessarily technical competencies, little NGOs either, etc. So this follow-up to install capacities is key. I will finish with that. So thank you very much, Daniel, Carlos, and Yves. Thank you for being with us today and to exchange your visions. Thank you, everybody. And last few words. If you looking at this webinar, you are from an organization that is part of this sector around the Amazon and America tropical forest, or in any other part of the world, and you would like to exchange more with the speakers or our organization, please don't hesitate to write to us. You will see the email in the chat. It's hublac@autism.org. And you will be able to see a recording of this session in the YouTube channel. You will see also a link in the chat. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Celine. Thank you for the invitation.